this wonderful book, first and foremost, we must understand, is not just a book of rules. It is a book of rules, yes, and a book of commandments, yes, and a book of lessons, and a book of instruction, and a book of opinions. We err when we decide that opinion is a commandment. Now, let's talk about the church at Ephesus, because that's where Timothy was sent to be the minister. This letter is written to Timothy at the church in Ephesus in a particular time when that church was in deep doo-doo. That church was in trouble. That church had lost its focus completely. The church was doing all sorts of stuff that had nothing to do with being a Christian household. In chapter 1 of the first letter, the letter reads this way: I urge you, Timothy. I think I beg you is probably a better word. I urge you, Timothy, as I did when I was on my way to Macedonia, to remain in Ephesus, to stay in Ephesus, so that you may instruct certain people, it says it, certain people, not to teach any different doctrine, and not to occupy themselves with myths and endless genealogies that promote speculations rather than the divine training that is known by faith. The aim of such instruction, Timothy, is love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and sincere faith. Some people have deviated from these and turned to meaningless talk, desiring to be teachers of the law without understanding either what they are saying or the things about which they make assertions. Woo-hoo! Preach it. This is calling the church at Ephesus to account. This is backing up Timothy, who has just walked into a hornet's nest where people are doing their own thing and don't want to hear about what they thought about when they first became believers. They have dug in their heels and they're doing what they want to do. This point, I want to just talk a little bit about the difference between a commandment and an opinion, or a commandment and a lesson. Here's a commandment. It's an example out of Deuteronomy. Okay, it's listed in Deuteronomy as a commandment. Are you ready? Listen very carefully. Commandments are something we're supposed to follow, right? There are 613 of them in the Old Testament. There's one in the New Testament, thank God. If someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father and mother, who does not heed them when they discipline him, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his town at the gate of that place. They shall say to the elders of his town, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all of the men of the town shall stone him to death. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel will hear and be afraid. Well, that's a law that's not practiced in our society. If it were, you'd be serving life. There's a difference between commandments, and we have evolved, we have changed as a society, and a difference between commandments and opinions. What this letter to Timothy espouses or talks about is talking about opinions about how the household should be conducted, not commandments. Is it difficult for you to imagine that Timothy arrived at the church in Ephesus to serve as their pastor, this young, wet behind the ears newcomer, this young whippersnapper who came in all fired up with his relationship with Paul to teach about Jesus Christ. And what he finds are people who have dug in their heels and are doing something else. What he finds when he gets to the church, that there are people who are promoting other ideas, myths, and endless genealogies, and promoting speculations, who are teaching about the law that they don't even understand, teaching about rules that they have made and have no understanding about, yet asserting that these are the rules. It's a church killer. It's a church killer. Well, if I were to compare it with the church killers of today, it's kind of like coming into a church and having somebody say to you, well, no, you can't change that because we've... Say it out loud. I love it. Because you know. Go ahead, say it again.
We've always...
Yeah, you know. I don't even need to say it. There are certain people in the church in Ephesus who have come forward to Timothy and said, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that either. No, they won't like it if you do that. No, you can't make that change because they won't like it if you do that. The author of this letter is so concerned for this, the church in Ephesus, saying that this church is in jeopardy. The people are running amok. They have lost focus. I dare say that that whole thing about women who shouldn't have authority over men has to do with a bunch of church ladies who came up to Timothy and said, you know, dear, you've got to do it this way. The enthusiasm that first ignited their ministry, the enthusiasm that first ignited their faith, has begun to wane. We can't be sure what the author means exactly when he refers to meaningless talk or folks purporting to teach laws they don't understand, but we know, we've always done it this way. Or maybe meaningless talk is complaining. Maybe meaningless talk is backbiting. Maybe meaningless talk is gossip. Maybe meaningless talk is being critical of the other people in the church. Maybe meaningless talk is commenting on how somebody's dressed in church. Maybe meaningless talk has to do with somebody's behavior in church. Maybe meaningless talk has something to do with pointing at a newcomer and saying, what are they doing here? Maybe certain people were involved in meaningless talk. Maybe certain people were involved in casting an eye that was a critical eye at something that bothered them or distressed them or disturbed them. This letter is written to back up Timothy, who has walked into this hornet's nest, who is witnessing disunity and resentment and anger, and certain people's desire to control the household. On this Christian Education Sunday, it is right to talk about the importance of right instruction. This isn't a sermon just about the importance of Sunday school, although that is one of the points that I think I might be trying to make. But it's a sermon about how important it is for all of us to participate and partake of instruction, right instruction, because it helps us on our Christian way. We call ourselves United Methodist Christians because there really is a method to our madness. Or a madness.